I woke up that day with memories that weren't mine. Or maybe they were. Memories from another life hit me all at once, like a wave crashing over my head. I sat on the balcony of my father's castle, staring at the sky, trying to figure out who I even was anymore. Then I heard it. A voice in my head told me I had some kind of system now. It said I could use gold coins to make people stronger, but only if they were loyal to me. Really loyal. 60 points or higher. I opened the panel. It was almost empty. No guards, no level, nothing. Just my name, Martin, 5th son of Count White. Not exactly impressive. I looked down from the balcony at the servants and guards walking around below. I could see their loyalty like numbers floating above their heads. 30, 19, 25, 34. Nobody even came close to 60. I needed to find the right people fast. That evening, we had dinner together as a family. My 3 older brothers, my sister Beline, and me, all sitting at the long table, waiting for father and his wives. He walked in like he always did, tall and strong, with the 4 ladies behind him. My father was a legend. He started as a common soldier and fought his way up to Golden Knight and Count. Nobody else in the kingdom had done that. My mother, Lady Ellie, was one of his wives. She came from a noble family, married to him through some political deal. We started eating, and after a while, I spoke up. I asked father if I could pick 10 knight attendants from the military camp. My sister Beline looked at me like I was strange. She asked why I needed them when I already had castle guards and soldiers to protect me. My brothers didn't say anything. They just glanced at me and kept eating. Father finished his meat, wiped his mouth, and said yes. I could choose 10 from the Valley Knights, who had just come back from duty. But he made it clear, once I turned 16 and left for my own lands, the family wouldn't give me any more knights. I agreed. It was a fair deal. Those knights were experienced fighters. They weren't at full strength yet, but that didn't matter. I had my system. With enough gold, I could make them stronger than anyone expected. My mother sighed quietly. I could tell she was worried, but she didn't say anything. After dinner, my eldest brother Karen came over and offered to go with me to pick the attendants. Father had already left the hall without another word. After dinner, I walked with my brother Karen through the long garden corridor toward the knight's camp. Maids and guards bowed as we passed. Karen warned me along the way. He said once those 10 attendants became mine, the family would stop training them. They'd only cover food and a place to sleep. Everything else, armor, night potions, that would all be on me. He also told me not to do anything dangerous. He had a point. I didn't have my own lands yet, so taking care of 10 people wouldn't be cheap. And even though they'd follow me because I was a count's son, I still had to think about how they felt. We reached the camp soon enough. Father's domain had 5 knight orders, about 800 members each. These weren't regular soldiers. Even the lowest squires could take down a dozen armed men by themselves. A full knight order could beat an army of 50,000 in open battle. And the silver knights, they could fight 1,000 men alone. The guards at the gate saluted us right away. Karen asked if Captain Valley was around. The soldier told us he'd just come back from duty and was in the barracks helping some squires prepare to advance to full knights. Valley was a silver knight, and he sensed us coming before we even got inside. He was already waiting at the barracks door with a grin. He joked about whether we wanted him to take us monster hunting. Karen explained the real reason. Father had allowed me to pick 10 squires from Valley's command. Valley looked at me with curiosity and asked why I suddenly wanted squires. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't exactly tell him about my system. He didn't push it. He just smiled and told us to follow him. He said there were over 180 attendants in the camp, all experienced and skilled. I could walk around and pick whoever I wanted. I was really grateful. I knew some of the ones I might choose could be close to becoming full knights, and taking them away wasn't a small thing. But Karen didn't seem to care much. To him, the gap between an attendant and a real knight was huge. The potion needed to cross that gap was incredibly expensive. I spent about an hour looking through the camp and picked 10 attendants who were willing to come with me. All of them were at the peak of their training. Before we left, Valley asked us to send his regards to Father and mentioned he could use a few more bottles of night potion. He walked us all the way to the gate, being so warm and friendly that Karen and I felt a little awkward. We promised we'd pass along his request. Back at the castle, Karen went off to handle his own business and told Father about Valley's request. I brought my 10 new attendants to my room, gave them a few instructions, then had the butler take them to rest. The next morning, after breakfast, I lined up all 10 attendants and checked their loyalty. Most of them were around 50, close, but not enough for my system to work. Then I noticed one man. His loyalty was 61. He was about 30 years old, with a long scar running from his forehead down to his neck. His hair was short and messy, and his eyes were sharp, like a clever old wolf watching everything around him. I walked up to him and asked his name. He dropped to one knee and said, "My lord, my name is Betten. I'm honored to be chosen and will be your most loyal follower." I liked him right away. I told him he wouldn't regret his choice and made him captain of the group. He nodded, waved the others along, and led them off to get ready. A moment later, a maid came to my room and told me my mother wanted to see me. I already had a feeling I knew what it was about. I followed the maid through the castle hallways. The walls were covered with oil paintings, polished armor, gleaming weapons, and stuffed magical beasts that looked almost alive. Whoever decorated this place had real taste. When we reached Mother's door, the maid knocked softly. Mother called us in. I entered, and the maid closed the door behind me and left. I bowed and said good morning. She laughed a little at my politeness, but got straight to the point. She wanted to know why I needed those 10 guards. She'd grown up among nobles and had heard plenty of stories about foolish young men running off on dangerous adventures after reading too many books. I promised her over and over that I wasn't planning anything reckless. I told her I just wanted to train some people and find a way to make money. After enough reassuring, she finally relaxed. The truth was, she hadn't called me to scold me. She wanted to give me gold coins she'd been saving. She knew that without my own land, I couldn't afford to support 10 attendants. Even powerful counts struggled with those costs. Father spent a fortune keeping 5 night orders running, and he could only manage it because his territory sat on the border. I told her not to worry. I already had a plan to earn money, and supporting 10 people wouldn't be a problem. She sighed and handed me a space ring filled with coins. I couldn't refuse, so I thanked her and took it. Then her mood changed. She got this playful look in her eyes and told me that my sister Beline was hosting a banquet in a few days. She said there would be many beautiful young ladies there, and if any of them caught my eye, I should tell her. She'd fully support me. I didn't know whether to laugh or groan. I was only 15. Marriage was the last thing on my mind. But I knew there was no arguing with her, so I just nodded and agreed. After leaving Mother's room, I went to the military camp to see Captain Valley. I didn't stay long. When I came out, Betten and the others were waiting for me outside. We set off toward the falling autumn mountains with a small group of soldiers escorting us. Along the way, we passed villages and fields. The common folk bowed whenever they saw our knights and soldiers ride by. Thanks to the horses, we reached the area near the mountains in about half an hour. There used to be just a small village here, but over time it had grown into a busy little town. Father had approved the expansion. Most of the people living there were free mercenaries or fortune seekers hoping to get rich fast. With so many people gathered in one place, all kinds of trade had popped up, especially the buying and selling of servants. The town mayor was already waiting for us at the gate. He must have heard I was coming. The moment I rode up, he rushed over with a big smile and greeted me like I was the most important person in the world. I told him I wanted to visit the slave market and pick out some workers. He nodded eagerly and said he'd take me to the best market in town right away. As we walked through the streets, merchants shouted and children laughed around us. People stepped aside when they saw the mayor leading our group. Nobody wanted to offend a noble. On this continent, class divisions were strict. A noble could end someone's life on a whim, and no one would say a word. The mayor called over the tax officer who ran the market. I told him what I needed, and he quickly went through the stalls. Before long, he came back with several traders and workers who fit my requirements. I looked them over carefully. In the end, I found 26 half-beasts and 60 beast folk who met my standards. After one more round of picking, I gathered 100 people total. I paid for them, and we continued toward the mountains. I wasn't going to invest too heavily in these slaves. Training people takes time, and I knew that. The mountains were full of different races and plenty more slaves. If these ones didn't work out, I wouldn't lose sleep over it. As long as they helped me reach my goal and my gold wasn't wasted. Because we had 100 slaves slowing us down, the trip took much longer. We didn't reach the mountain pass until around 5 in the afternoon. Betten looked up at the sky and suggested we rest for the night and enter the mountains tomorrow. I shook my head. We had to go in tonight. Shadow wolves were the target, and only live ones would sell for a good price. I told everyone to rest for a bit first, then sent one of my attendants back to the castle to let the steward know we wouldn't be returning that night. Night fell, and darkness covered everything like spilled ink. We checked our gear, packed up, and got on our horses. I cracked the whip and drove the slaves forward into the autumn-fall mountains. Benton rode beside me, looking confused. He asked why no one in town had found the shadow wolves yet, especially with so many mercenaries around. I smiled and told him the story. About a month ago, Captain Valley and I had been hunting on the edge of the mountains when we spotted a small pack of shadow wolves moving into the area. Valley led me and a few bronze knights to track them, and we found their den hidden deep in a valley. The pack was small, only about 10 wolves. We didn't try to catch them during the day because that would have caused unnecessary deaths. Instead, we pulled back quietly. Before leaving, Valley set up magical devices around the valley to hide the wolves from anyone passing through. That morning, before we left, I made a deal with him. 10 bottles of night training potion in exchange for ownership of the whole pack. I followed the route from memory, guiding us along the winding mountain paths. It was past midnight by the time we finally found the hidden valley. I pulled the reins and started giving orders. The plan was simple but rough. Shadow wolves were as strong as night apprentices. They moved through the dark without leaving a trace, which made them very valuable. They never came out during the day, so the only way to catch them was at night, and for that, we needed bait. I told the men to send the slaves into the valley. When the wolves attacked, they'd reveal themselves, and the knights would move in fast to capture them. I put Benton in charge of grabbing the cubs and making sure the slaves didn't hurt them in the chaos. The knights took their positions upwind. I reminded them, injure the wolves if needed, but don't kill any. When the slaves found out what they were being used for, some panicked. A few tried to run when their restraints were loosened, but Benton's riders chased them down and cut them down right there. After that, the rest went silent. The smell of blood drifted through the air. Valley's magical devices were running low on power. A lookout wolf sensed something wrong and howled sharply. The hunting wolves outside heard the call and raced back toward the valley like black lightning. The lookout and 3 mother wolves charged out, leaving one behind to guard the cubs. Hidden in the darkness, they moved like ghosts, taking down slaves one by one. When only about 40 slaves were left, I shouted the signal. The knights and Benton's team drew their swords and charged. 2 wolves reacted too slowly and got trapped immediately. They struggled and snapped their fangs, but the knights held firm. Then strange ripples spread through the dark, and 5 more wolves appeared, growling and baring their teeth. Benton and the knights split into 2 groups. One took on the returning wolves, the other rushed toward the den. I watched it all from a thick tree branch above the valley. As time passed, the fight turned in our favor. Once I was satisfied, I climbed down and walked into the valley with the squad leader, a bronze knight, close behind me. The slaves were nearly done for, but the knights had restrained every wolf. Benton's group found 5 pups inside the den. I already had a plan. Tomorrow, once we got back to the castle, I'd sell the wolves and their pups through the family's trade guild in the royal capital. That would bring in a good pile of gold. I didn't sleep at all that night. By the time dawn came, my face felt heavy, my eyes burned, and dark circles hung underneath them. The knights in Benton's group, on the other hand, looked perfectly fine, not even a little tired. Without the slaves slowing us down, we moved fast and reached Fall Autumn Town before long. The mayor heard we were coming and scrambled out of bed to greet us. But by that point, I could barely keep my eyes open. I told Benton to find a decent inn nearby. The moment I got into the room, I didn't wash, didn't change. I just fell onto the bed and was out cold. The mayor stuck around even though I was sleeping. He had his servants prepare a big meal for the knights. After the knights made sure the shadow wolves were locked up safe, they sat down and ate well. Nobody touched the wolves while I was asleep. I woke up sometime in the afternoon, stretched, washed my face, and stepped outside. Benton was right there, waiting. I asked about the wolves, and he told me they were in the backyard, guarded by the night squad. The mayor had brought a special magical cage from the slave market to hold them. Shadow wolves were too valuable to take any chances with. I went to check on them myself and told Benton to bring 10 portions of food so the wolves could eat. He came back with the food, and the mayor, who also carried a message from father. He wanted me back at the castle once I was done. I fed the wolves. Once they were full, they'd be handed off to the family's trade caravan and sent to the royal capital for sale. While I was there, I used my system to check everyone's loyalty. Every one of my 10 attendants was now above 60. That was good news. After Benton finished signing the trade contracts, the mayor politely asked if I wanted to eat before heading back. That's when I realized how hungry I was. I'd been so focused on the wolves that I forgot about myself. The mayor arranged a solid meal for all of us, and we ate well before setting off. On the ride back, I counted what was left of my gold and did the math. Even with what Mother had given me, it wasn't enough to upgrade all 10 people. But I wasn't too worried. Once the wolves sold, I'd have plenty. I already knew the costs: 100 gold to advance a squire to Iron Knight, 500 for Bronze Knight, and 5,000 for Silver Knight. It only got more expensive from there. We reached the city of Oathblade, and Benton's group headed to the guards' quarters while the night squad went back to their barracks. I went straight to see Father. We talked for a long time behind closed doors. I won't say what about, but when I walked out, I was smiling. It went well. On my way to visit Mother, I turned a corner in the corridor and spotted my third brother, Wayne, sitting there reading with deep focus. He'd already reached the strength of a knight squire, nearly as strong as our eldest brother Karen, and a year younger at just 17. In this world, you can't start training in knightly power or magic until you turn 16, so his progress was impressive. If he kept going steady, reaching Golden Knight someday seemed certain. After leaving Mother's room, I went straight to the guards' quarters. I already had a plan: promote Benton to Iron Knight first, then work on the others one by one. But I had to be careful and quiet about it. If anyone found out I could help people advance this fast, not even Father could protect me. I called Benton over. His loyalty was already above 70, but I still wasn't going to tell him about the system. Even after what I was about to do, I planned to keep that secret forever. We walked to a quiet corner of the training ground. I looked him in the eye and spoke seriously. Since you serve under me, I won't let you worry about your future. Are you willing to swear your loyalty to me? He didn't hesitate. My lord, I am willing. Right then, the system's voice rang in my head. It detected a qualified member and asked if I wanted to approve. I said yes in my mind. I told Benton to pay close attention to what was about to happen inside him. Then I gave the silent command: upgrade Benton, deduct 100 gold coins. A chime sounded. My panel updated. One oath guard now listed under my name. Benton's body started glowing softly from within. His eyes went wide with shock. When the light faded, a wave of powerful energy burst out of him. Even I could feel the pressure standing right in front of him. After a few moments, he got control of his new strength and pulled his aura back in. Then he dropped to one knee, voice full of emotion. He thanked me and swore that anyone who stood in my way, he would remove them with everything he had. His loyalty shot straight to absolute. That meant no matter what happened, no matter how dangerous things got, he would never turn his back on me. I told him to stay at the training ground and get used to his new power, then headed back to my room. My mind was racing the whole way. I kept thinking about how to use this system better. When I got to my room, a cool breeze drifted in through the window. I closed the door, walked to the window, and looked outside. The wind felt nice on my face, but inside, I was burning with excitement. Then I sat down and faced reality. Money was the biggest problem. Catching the shadow wolves had already cost dozens of gold coins. Between what Mother gave me and my own savings, I had a little over 800 gold coins left, plus some silver and copper. If I spent all of it upgrading knights, I'd have nothing left for potions, training, armor, or new equipment. Even if the shadow wolves sold for around 1,000 gold, I still owed Valley 10 bottles of night potion. After paying that, I'd only have about 500 gold left. Nowhere near enough. After thinking it over carefully, I made up my mind. I'd have Benton and the others form a mercenary group to start earning money. But before that, I needed to raise their strength first. If they went out on missions too weak, they could get wiped out by a strong enemy. Building their power had to come first. Everything else would follow from there. A few days later, my sister Belen held her banquet. The grand hall looked incredible, crystal chandeliers glowing warm light everywhere, the whole place decorated to impress. Noble ladies floated around in long gowns, diamonds and pearls sparkling against their skin. Groups of noblemen stood together swirling glasses of red wine, talking about harvests, magic research, and political gossip from the capital. The younger ones bragged about their latest hunts, while the older ones quietly made business deals behind polite smiles. I had no interest in any of it. These gatherings were dull and exhausting. Just a room full of scheming people pretending to be friendly. I would have rather stayed in my room figuring out how to earn more gold. But Belen wouldn't let me skip it. She was like a little fox, always finding a way to get what she wanted. First, she grabbed my arm and begged, saying she'd have no one to rely on if I didn't come. When that didn't work, she started describing all the things that would be there: magic performances, rare creatures, painting such a picture that I started to waver. And then Mother asked me to go too. After that, I had no excuse left. So there I was, standing in the corner of the hall, feeling completely out of place. I sighed quietly and wished the whole thing would just end. Then I heard a voice. "Hello. Excuse me, are you Martin White?" I turned and saw a girl around my age. She wore a light blue gown with silver embroidery that shimmered when she moved. Her face was fair and delicate, and her bright eyes looked at me with soft curiosity. She tilted her head slightly, waiting for my answer. I was surprised. I hadn't expected anyone to come talk to me, especially not a girl like her. I smiled and nodded. "Yes, I'm Martin White. What can I do for you, miss?" Her face lit up. A blush crept across her cheeks, and she twisted her fingers nervously. I saw you standing alone, so I wanted to come say hello." Then she curtsied neatly and introduced herself. "Nice to meet you. I'm Rena Carlos, the 8th daughter of Count Carlos." We started talking, and I quickly noticed how easily she got shy. I couldn't help teasing her a little here and there, and every time her face turned red like an apple. Before I knew it, the banquet was over. It felt like time had slipped by too fast. There were still so many things we hadn't talked about. When we finally said goodbye, neither of us really wanted to walk away. Then, just as Rena left, a figure appeared beside me. It was Belen. She had that mischievous grin on her face, staring at me like she'd just discovered some great secret. I didn't look at her. I turned, walked out of the hall without a word, and headed straight for my room, my steps getting faster with every second. Over the next few days, Rena and I kept exchanging letters. Our friendship grew with every message. We agreed to meet again once we were both at the academy. Meanwhile, good news came in. The Shadow Wolf sold for over 1,500 gold coins, much more than I expected. After paying Captain Valley his night potion, I still had about 1,000 gold left. With that kind of money, I was ready to move forward with my plan, forming my own mercenary group. I decided to invest everything I could spare into making Betten and the others stronger. I called them all to a quiet corner of the training ground and helped them level up one by one. At first, I thought about pushing one of them all the way to Bronze Knight, but then I remembered they'd also need proper armor, and that would cost too much. Instead, I raised everyone evenly. That way, if someone fell in battle, the loss wouldn't hit as hard. After careful planning, I spent 800 gold coins replacing their old, worn-out gear with brand-new E-grade knight armor. In most knight orders, only Iron Knights got that kind of equipment. Some people around the city noticed my guards wearing the new armor, but nobody cared too much. The nobles living in Oathblade had been building their power for generations. Their wealth and connections ran so deep that a small group of upgraded guards wasn't worth a second glance. Only when small changes turned into real strength would anyone in power start paying attention. Soon, I'd be heading to the Royal Capital's Academy, just like my older siblings had. The academy wasn't really about studying. It was about meeting people, making connections, and seeing more of the world. But before that, I had business to take care of. I called Betten and the others over and told them to go register a mercenary group at the Mercenary Guild. Keeping them sitting around the castle was a waste. Out in the field, they could earn gold without me paying them a salary. Mercenary groups were ranked in 6 levels: S, A, B, C, D, and E, based on the member's strength. Higher rank meant better missions and bigger rewards. Betten and the team were excited. They headed to the guild right away, talking along the way about how to earn as much gold as they could for me. The guild was packed with adventurers looking for work. Betten went to the front desk, explained what they needed, and the staff checked their skills and equipment. Thanks to their knight-level fighting ability and the good gear I'd given them, they registered as a D-rank group. That meant they could already take on decent missions with solid pay. They picked their first job from the task board, something near the royal capital, and set off right away. In the days that followed, I settled into a steady routine at the castle. I knew I'd be heading to the imperial capital soon, and the last thing I wanted was to embarrass myself with bad manners. So I asked the butler to find me etiquette tutors and military instructors. Every morning, I woke at dawn, washed up, put on proper clothes, and went to my etiquette lessons. The tutors were patient but strict. Every detail mattered: how I walked, how I sat, how I held my fork. It all looked simple, but getting it right took real effort. I practiced over and over until the movements started to feel natural. After lessons, I spent hours in the training field. The instructors set up all kinds of equipment to strengthen my body and gave me special potions to help me grow without getting hurt. Time moved fast. Before I knew it, the day to leave for the academy was getting close. I could only keep in touch with Betten and the others through letters. Magic communication crystals were 5 gold coins each, way too expensive to use often. The castle gave me 10 gold coins a month, which sounds like a lot, but 2 gold coins could support a common family for an entire year. Anything involving magic cost a fortune. And once a noble heir got their own land, the money from the family would stop completely. From the letters, I learned the mercenary group had already finished several missions and saved up 20 gold coins. They were getting closer to the royal capital. After half a month of training, I could see the difference in my body. I looked stronger. Mother came to check on me often during that time. Then one day, while I was training as usual, a shadow cut across the sky. A griffin rider. The griffin was covered in wounds and barely staying in the air, circling weakly like it could drop any second. Finally, it crashed down hard in the training field, kicking up a cloud of dust. The knights froze for a moment, then reacted fast. They dropped their weapons and rushed over from every direction, surrounding the field with swords drawn and faces tense. The rider jumped off, looking exhausted and panicked. He ran straight toward Captain Valley, who was already hurrying over. Before Valley could even open his mouth, the rider shouted, "Captain Valley, find the Count. The Orc Kingdom has launched a sudden attack. They've already broken through Frostvale Pass." Then he collapsed to the ground, unconscious. The news hit everyone like a storm. Knights stared at each other in disbelief. How was that possible? Even if the orcs had attacked, there should have been warnings. Frostvale Pass had a powerful magic barrier called Frost's Wrath. How did the enemy get through? And why hadn't anyone sent word using a communication crystal? While everyone stood frozen, trying to make sense of it, a figure appeared before us as if out of thin air. It was Father. The moment he showed up, the air got even heavier. Father ordered the wounded rider and his griffin taken away for treatment, then went straight to his study. He activated the large communication crystal and reported the news. Frostvale Pass had fallen to the Orc Kingdom. I wasn't in the room, but I heard what happened after. The Royal Council erupted in chaos the moment they got the message. Chairman McAdoo slammed his hands on the table and ordered Father to take the 10th Imperial Legion to Frostvale Pass immediately. They had to seal the breach before the orcs spread into the northern lands. Father didn't waste a second. He pulled out a smaller crystal and sent orders for the 10th Legion to assemble and march. Then he started contacting every northern noble, one by one. He reached Marquis Roderick first, explained the danger, and got his promise to gather troops. After that, he called the rest. It took time, but he was patient with each one. Before long, the entire North was preparing for war. I paced back and forth in my room, boots thudding against the floor. The sky outside was getting dark, and the weight of everything pressed down on me like a stone. Then the butler came in and told me Father had called everyone to the main hall. I took a deep breath, fixed my clothes, and walked there quickly. Father stood at the front, face hard as iron. The ladies looked pale with worry. My eldest brother Karen had his fists clenched tight. Beline, Wayne, and Derry all stood stiff, eyes locked on Father. He spoke slowly. Frostvale Pass had fallen. The orcs could attack the north at any moment. Our city, Oathblade, was the closest to the pass. He'd already ordered the other 4 knight orders back to defend it, and sent 2 regular legions to guard the fortresses on either side. He would lead the valiant knights to join the 10th Legion himself. Everything at home would be left to us. He looked at Karen and told him, as the eldest, to uphold the family's honor and protect the castle and everyone in it. Karen nodded without hesitation. Then father looked at the rest of us. He told us to help Karen and never let our guard down. We all straightened up and answered together. Yes, father. He turned and walked outside. In the courtyard, the valiant knights were already assembled. Warhorses stamped and neighed. The armored knights stood in rows, faces serious and ready. Father swung onto his horse, raised his sword, and shouted, "Move out!" Under the darkening sky, he and his knights rode off toward Frostvale Pass and disappeared into the distance. I watched until I couldn't see them anymore. My heart was a mess of feelings. From that moment on, the fate of the entire North hung by a thread. I couldn't sleep that night. The next morning, Karen gathered all of us to talk about defense. I suggested we strengthen patrols around the estate and set up watchtowers. He agreed and sent people to get it done right away. Days passed. News from the front came in waves, some good, some bad. Every time the communication crystal lit up, we all held our breath. One day, a message came through. The 10th Legion had joined up with Father's valiant knights and launched a counterattack. The situation had improved a little. We all let out a breath of relief. But the calm didn't last. A few days later, more reports arrived. The Orc Kingdom had sent reinforcements. Both sides were now locked in a fierce battle on the Frostvale Plains. The news that came next was bad. Really bad. Father had never expected the Orc Kingdom to secretly move 2 elite legions from the Dwarven border to the Frostvale Plains. He was surrounded, with 3 golden knights protecting him. He took a dangerous potion called Life Burn and led his 2 knight orders in a desperate fight to break through. He made it back to the Legion camp, but the moment he arrived, his body gave out. He collapsed. The knights around him panicked and called for the alchemist. The old alchemist took one look at Father and went pale. He pulled out a rare potion, Spring of Life, said to be able to pull someone back from the edge of death. He poured it carefully into Father's mouth. Even unconscious, Father swallowed it. Slowly, color returned to his face and his breathing steadied. He was stable, but far from recovered. That would take time. With Father unconscious, the deputy commander took over. When he heard what had happened, the defeat, the Orc reinforcements, he knew things were falling apart fast. Morale in the 10th Legion dropped hard. The Orc Marshal, Coulson, saw the opening and ordered a full attack. 3 golden knights led the charge, followed by 3 extraordinary legions and 4 regular Orc legions, all crashing toward us. The deputy commander made a tough choice. He took half the legion, about 5,000 knights and 50,000 soldiers, to hold the enemy back and buy time. The rest were to carry Father back to Oathblade and defend the city. Back at the castle, I couldn't shake a terrible feeling in my gut. Something was wrong. I sent Druna, one of the knights from Betton's squad that I'd urgently recalled, to wait by the large communication crystal for news. Then I started thinking about money. If war was coming to us, I needed Betton stronger. Now, that meant gold. I expected borrowing from the family to be painful, full of questions and awkward explanations. But it wasn't. Everyone just handed over what they could without making a fuss. Mother even tried to give me her treasured jewelry box. I couldn't take that from her. Back in my room, I sat on the bed and counted everything in my space ring. Over 3,000 gold coins total. Most of it came from my second sister Beline. Her territory had a small crystal mine, the kind used to make communication crystals. In a world where information mattered more every day, those crystals were worth a fortune. She even gave me a few crystals on top of the gold. I sent for Betton. When he walked in, I looked him straight in the eye. Betton, think carefully. After this, you may never be able to show your true strength openly. Are you ready for that? He didn't hesitate for even a second. Yes, young Master Martin. Whatever you command, wherever you need me, I will follow without question. That was all I needed to hear. I gave the command to the system. Gold coins poured out like water as the upgrade began. Light flickered through the room, and an invisible force filled the air. 500 gold coins spent. Betton's body changed before my eyes. He stood taller, straighter. A new energy radiated from him, the unmistakable aura of a bronze knight. He had advanced. But the burst of power didn't go unnoticed. Within seconds, several silver knights and silver mages were at my door, knocking urgently. Young Master Martin, are you all right? I knew if my voice sounded even a little off, they'd break the door down. I opened it calmly, smiled, and told them everything was fine. Nothing had happened. They could go back to their posts. They looked uncertain, but they didn't dare ask who had released that aura. One by one, they turned and left. After closing the door, I told Betten to pack his things immediately and leave the castle. He was to go into the city of Oathblade, find a safe place to stay, and keep a communication crystal with him. When I needed him, I'd send word. He didn't ask questions. He packed quietly while the others watched with confused faces, then walked straight out of the castle without saying goodbye to anyone. I watched from the window until he disappeared from sight. Then the worst news came. In the crystal room, a message appeared. No image, just words. Father was gravely injured and still unconscious. The 10th Legion had been crushed. The deputy commander, half the legion, and an entire regular army had been completely wiped out. A group of knights was carrying Father back toward Oathblade right now. Everyone in the room froze. For a moment, nobody moved. Then it hit them all at once. Knights and squires jumped to their feet and ran out to spread the word to their families. Karen moved fast. He went straight to the large communication crystal and sent the full battle report from the Frostvale Plains to the Royal Council. The king received it, and I heard later what happened. He opened a direct connection with Marquis Roderick and described the disaster in detail. Roderick didn't hesitate. He promised to send all 5 knight orders stationed in Valley City to Oathblade at full speed. The king told Karen to stop the news from spreading further. Panic among the people would only make things worse. The Royal Council would handle it. Inside the palace, the council erupted into heated arguments. Factions clashed, proposals flew back and forth, voices rose. After a long and difficult debate, they finally agreed on a plan. The king gave his orders. The Royal 3rd, 5th, and 6th Legions, along with 2 Griffin Knight orders near the capital, would march north immediately. Golden mages from the royal court would go with them, and Prince Charlemagne Herbert himself would lead the army. Through the communication crystal, the king sent commands to every noble territory in the north. Everyone was ordered to gather their knights at Oathblade as fast as possible. They had to hold out until the royal legions arrived. And the warning was clear. Any noble who failed to show up would lose their title and their lands. Then Marquis Roderick contacted Karen directly. His voice was steady but serious. He told Karen to maintain order in the city and stop the news from spreading. No panic. Karen promised he would handle it. After ending the call, Karen got to work right away, sending people out to control the flow of information and calm the citizens. By the time Karen had the news under control, night had fallen. The rest of the family was already gathered in the meeting hall. The matriarch looked over the noisy room with a stern face and raised her voice. Quiet. Then she gave her orders calmly. The knights were to escort the family's women and about half our gold, somewhere around 70 to 80,000 coins, to Beline's territory. If we managed to push back the orcs, everyone could return safely. If the city fell, they would keep going to Valley City. Marquis Roderick would take them in out of respect for our family. The preparations started right away, but then disagreements broke out. Wayne, Derry, and I all refused to leave. We wouldn't go to Beline's territory. The men of the White family don't run from a fight. The matriarch tried to change our minds, but we wouldn't budge. In the end, the knights in charge of the evacuation moved quickly, loading the ladies and Beline onto the carriages without waiting for anyone to argue further. The goodbyes were hard. The ladies' eyes were full of tears as they spoke to their sons one by one. Beline cried so hard her sobs echoed through the courtyard. Wayne went to the matriarch and told her he'd already sent word to the knights stationed at his territory. They would go to Beline's lands and follow her orders, giving her extra protection whether she stayed there or moved on to Valley City. Then Mother found me. She held onto me tight and wouldn't let go. Mother, please don't worry, I said as gently as I could. My brothers are here with me. I'll be safe. I won't take any unnecessary risks. She wouldn't hear it. She begged me to come with her. She said that when I wasn't by her side, she felt uneasy and empty inside. I spent a long time calming her down. Slowly, she began to settle. But when she saw that my decision wasn't going to change, she let out a heavy sigh, turned, and climbed into the carriage. The moment she sat down, she opened the window again. Her eyes were wet and full of worry. My son, please take good care of yourself. Then she closed the window gently, as if that small movement took everything she had. Under the cover of darkness, the women left quietly. To avoid drawing attention from anyone in the city, They moved in small groups, protected by knights, slipping away fast and silent. The sound of hooves was muffled, and the rolling wheels faded into the night. Wayne, Derry, and I stood watching until the last carriage disappeared completely. None of us spoke. Our hearts were full of things we couldn't put into words. Then we turned back to the castle and went straight to Karen. We told him everything. The evacuation, the matriarch's orders, all of it. Karen listened without saying a word. When we finished, he stayed quiet for a long time. Then he let out a soft sigh, like the weight of the whole family had settled on his shoulders. He rubbed his temples, his eyes tired and heavy. The night grew deep, and the castle went quiet. But Karen's room still had a light burning. He was at his desk, working without rest, writing out orders and planning how we'd survive what was coming. He called the butler and told him to mount all the magic cannons on the battlements, fast and quiet. Then he ordered everyone to collect every magic crystal in the city. Not a single one could be missed. I couldn't sleep either. I paced around my room, the unease inside me growing worse with every step. Finally, I found myself standing outside Karen's study. I knocked. "Come in," he said without looking up, his pen still scratching across paper. When I stepped inside, he raised his head, surprised to see me this late. Before he could ask why I was there, I spoke. "Brother, I need to borrow more gold coins." "A lot this time." His pen stopped. "How much?" I took a deep breath. 110,000. Karen shot to his feet. The chair scraped hard against the floor. 110,000? Did I hear that right? He stared at me, completely stunned. I held his gaze and told him it was for something important, something that could help the family through this crisis. He studied my face for a long time, like he was trying to read my thoughts. The room went silent. Candlelight flickered in through soft shadows across both our faces. Finally, he sighed and sat back down. He said the family didn't have that much cash on hand, but Wayne could probably come up with a little over 10,000. He'd try to scrape together the rest from other places. I thanked him and left the study. I managed to get a few hours of sleep before a knock woke me at dawn. I dragged myself out of bed and opened the door. The butler stood there, straight and proper as always, holding out a finely crafted space ring. "Young Master Martin," he said with a slight bow, "Young Master Karen asked me to deliver this. It's all the gold the family can provide right now." I reached out and took it. Before I could say anything, the butler paused, then added something that hit me hard. He told me that to gather this much gold, Karen had sold almost all the family's knight armor, along with most of our valuable magic items and potions. He asked me to use the coins wisely and not let Karen's sacrifice go to waste. Then he bowed again and hurried off. I stood there holding the ring, my chest tight with a storm of feelings, gratitude for what my family had done, and the crushing weight of knowing it all rested on me now. I made a silent promise. I would not waste a single coin. I would use this gold to pull my family through. The moment the butler left, all my sleepiness was gone. I straightened my clothes and headed out of the castle. Near the guard's quarters, I found Knight Druna. He dropped to one knee the moment he saw me. I told him to come with me. We went to the stables and took 2 horned horses, real magical beasts, strong as a beginner squire and built for long rides. On the way, I pulled out a communication crystal and sent Betten a message to wait for us at the east gate of the city. First, Druna and I stopped at the Emerald Chamber of Commerce. Inside, rows of magical items sparkled on the shelves. I found a staff member and told him what I wanted, 2 B-grade magic tools called Thousand Faces. They could slightly change a person's appearance, though they couldn't hide aura. Not perfect, but useful enough, and the price was fair. I haggled with the manager and got 20% off. After paying, we headed to the east gate. Betten was already there waiting. As we were about to leave the city, a patrol of knights passed by. The lead knight recognized me and offered an escort. I smiled and waved him off. "Just a small errand," I told him. I'd be back soon. But even as I said it, I could feel the tension around the city. Magic cannons lined the walls. More knights than usual patrolled the streets. The closer we got to the gate, the heavier the air felt. Once outside, I led Druna and Betten to a valley I remembered from the Shadow Wolf hunt. It was quiet, surrounded by thick forest, with the smell of damp earth and fresh grass everywhere. The perfect place for what I had planned. I turned to them both. "This is the place. Here, you two will advance to Golden Knights." They looked at each other, then back at me. Their eyes were full of trust. I tied the horses to a patch of soft grass, then focused. My space ring glowed and gold coins poured out, forming two small piles. I counted them, 110,500 total. The extra 500 were for Druna's promotion to Bronze Knight first. I called Betten forward. As the gold disappeared, his energy started climbing, from bronze to silver, and then higher still. When he finally broke through to Golden Knight, a wave of pressure exploded outward. I could barely breathe. It felt like a stone was sitting on my chest. Once Betten steadied himself, I gathered the remaining coins and found a flat spot for Druna. His energy shifted and grew as the coins vanished one by one. All 110,500 gone. The pressure from both of them was so strong my legs went weak. I dragged myself to a big tree, sat down, and waited. That wait stretched from early morning to noon, and they still weren't done. I sent Karen a message through a crystal to let him know I was safe, but wouldn't be back until the next day. He asked if I needed help. I told him no. I was fine, just delayed. While waiting, I checked my system panel. Host, Martin. Level 0. Sworn guards, 10. There was a note. When I reached 100 members, the system would upgrade and let me convert magical minerals, tools, and herbs directly into gold. Night fell quietly. The valley went dark except for insect sounds. Betten and Druna were still deep in their breakthroughs, showing no sign of finishing. I pulled dried food and fresh meat from my space ring, gathered some wood, struck a spark, and got a campfire going. Fat from the meat dripped into the flames, sending up little sparks and filling the air with a good smell. I ate while watching the two of them concentrate. My thoughts drifted far away. That night, the powerful energy coming off them kept everything away. Not even insects came close. In that strange peace, I leaned against the tree and fell into a deep sleep. Morning light filtered through the leaves and woke me. I rubbed my eyes and looked over. They were still at it, brows slightly furrowed, energy mostly calm but flickering now and then. I figured advancing so many levels at once was putting too much strain on their bodies, making it hard to stabilize. I waited all morning. Then my communication crystal lit up. It was Karen, and his voice was tight with worry. Martin, you have to come back before nightfall. The rest of the 10th Legion is being held by 4 battalions of the Orc army. The other Orc legions are closing in on our territory. We don't know when Marquis Roderick's knights will arrive. Wayne and Derry each took a night group out to support the 10th Legion. My face went hard. The situation was falling apart fast. But I looked at Betten and Druna, still deep in their breakthroughs, and I knew I couldn't leave them. I spoke into the crystal. I understand. The moment I'm done here, I'll come back immediately. Please be careful and wait for me. After ending the call, I stood there staring at the two figures in the valley, silently praying they'd finish soon. The sun was already sinking by afternoon. Karen sent another message through the crystal, firm and direct. I had to be back before nightfall. Wayne and Derry had left at dawn to support the 10th Legion, but whether they'd reach Father in time was uncertain. I promised Karen I'd make it back, then turned off the crystal and looked at Betten and Druna. They were still deep in concentration, and all I could do was wait. Then I felt it, two powerful auras slowly fading, settling down. Betten and Druna opened their eyes. The joy on their faces was impossible to hide. They could feel the strength surging inside them. I walked over quickly and asked how they felt. Both dropped to one knee at the same time. Thank you, young Master Martin, they said together. They told me they'd fully mastered their power and could fight at the full level of a Golden Knight. I smiled. Then I pulled out the 2,000 Faces masks and handed them over. The moment they put them on, their faces changed, reshaped by invisible hands into completely different people. I looked them over carefully and nodded. From now on, never show your true face in a fight, I warned them. Some powerful nobles have magic items above B grade that can track your aura. If that happens, we'll be in serious trouble. I waved my hand. All right, let's go. We hurried toward the city, and by evening we were near the gate. I told them the plan. I'd go in first with the big-horned horse. Druna would hand his horse to me and follow Betten into the city later. I didn't want Druna going back to the castle. He'd stay with Betten at his place. I gave Druna a communication crystal so we could stay in contact and told him I'd get them space rings soon. When I reached the city gate, something felt wrong. The gate, normally wide open, was shut tight. Knights rushed back and forth along the walls, faces serious, watching everything. When they saw me, they signaled for the gate to open. I rode through and looked up at the knight captain. What's going on? He just shook his head. Go see young Master Karen. I rode down the main street toward the castle. Soldiers patrolled everywhere. They saluted as I passed. Every shop was closed. The streets were dead silent. Normally at dusk, people would be out walking, buying snacks, enjoying the evening. Now there was nothing. The emptiness made my stomach drop. I pushed the horse faster. At the castle gate, the guards recognized me and opened up right away. Inside, the training ground was packed with carriages. I stopped a soldier and asked what was happening. He told me everything. That morning, some noble had leaked the news. Frostvale Pass had fallen and father was badly injured. It spread through the city like fire. The nobles inside the walls refused to leave their property and came running to the castle for help. The commoners outside nearly rioted. Karen didn't want knights handling the crowd because they'd be too rough and people would get hurt or killed. So he brought in 2,000 soldiers from a nearby fortress to keep order and set up a curfew. I told the soldier to take my horse to the stables and ran to find Karen. The meeting hall was chaos. Every important noble in the city had crammed inside. The air was hot and thick with tension. People were shouting over each other, faces red, veins bulging. These were the same people who looked calm and graceful at banquets. Now they were like cornered animals. Some were screaming at whoever had tried to keep the news quiet. Others demanded to know what would happen next. A few were rolling up their sleeves, ready to throw punches. I called the butler over and asked where Karen was. He told me, and I went straight to the study. Inside, Karen was sitting with a few noble representatives, discussing what to do with their properties. I knocked, stepped in, and nodded politely to each noble. Then I caught Karen's eye and gave him a look. He understood immediately. He excused himself, stood up, and followed me into the next room. The moment we were alone, I looked him in the eye and smiled. Big brother, don't worry. The White family will get through this safely. Karen stared at me, curious but trusting. He didn't ask what I'd done outside the city. He knew I never said things without reason. Then I asked him what the nobles wanted from him. He sighed and explained. They were trying to figure out how to handle their estates if things went bad. My mind started racing. This was an opportunity. If I played it right, I could take control of those estates. With 2 golden knights now secretly at my side, we had real strength to help defend the city. If we could hold out until the royal army and Marquis Roderick's knights arrived, we had a real chance. Under the flickering candlelight, I leaned in close to Karen and told him my plan. Buy up the nobles' estates inside the city while they were desperate to sell. Karen leaned back in his chair, tapping the armrest, looking unsure. He stared out the window and said quietly that he didn't think the city could hold. 3 golden knights were leading the orc army, and without reinforcements, we'd fall. The situation was worse than I thought. Even though the king had ordered all northern nobles to send troops, the powerful ones hiding behind Longtooth Pass, the second largest pass in the north, had no intention of fighting. They planned to let us take the hit and defend from their safe position instead. They hired a few low-rank mercenary groups and called it support. Marquis Roderick was furious when he found out. He ordered them to send real troops, but only the nobles outside Longtooth Pass listened. The ones inside kept making excuses and dragging their feet. Roderick couldn't force them. He could only grit his teeth and promise to deal with them after the war. The king heard about it too and quietly wrote down their names. I hesitated. I knew Karen wouldn't go along with my plan unless he believed we could actually defend the city. So I told him the truth. I moved closer and lowered my voice. I have 2 golden knights who follow my orders. Karen froze. His calm face cracked with shock, eyes wide. He almost asked something, then stopped himself. After a deep breath, he looked at me seriously. Can you fully control them? I smiled. Brother, don't worry. Everything is under my control. He let out a long breath and relaxed. I could see it clicking in his mind. My confidence when I walked in, the gold I'd borrowed, the time I'd spent outside the city. It all made sense now. We talked for a while, and out in the study, the noble representatives started getting restless. Their whispers grew louder, and complaints piled up. Finally, Karen pushed the door open and walked in calmly. He apologized for the wait, then got straight to business. He told them the White family was willing to buy their estates at 90% of the original price, not in cash, but using 3 mineral deposits as collateral, redeemable within 3 years. The room exploded. Faces went red. Some slammed the table. Others stared at Karen like he was robbing them. But Karen didn't flinch. He picked up his cold tea and took a few slow sips, letting the anger burn itself out. Eventually, the nobles calmed down and huddled together to whisper. An older representative stepped forward and said the price was too low. They couldn't even cover their costs. He offered 80% of market value in equivalent minerals, their biggest concession. Karen didn't budge. They went back and forth until they finally settled on 12% of the original value. The nobles hated it. These estates were the foundation of their families, built up over many years, symbols of honor and wealth. But the reality was brutal. The reinforcements were delayed, the coalition was weak, and Marquis Roderick's forces had only one golden knight. Even if they arrived in time, holding back the orc tide was far from certain. By the time the royal army reached us, they'd probably just be cleaning up ruins. With no better options, the noble representatives signed the transfer agreements. One by one, their carriages rolled out of the training ground, wheels kicking up dust until the last one disappeared. I rushed to the study the moment they were gone. When Karen told me they'd bought everything for just 12%, I stood there stunned for a second, then burst out laughing. I couldn't help it. The sound echoed through the empty room. Karen smiled too. Then he called the butler and gave him instructions. Keep the grain and oil shops running. The city still needed to eat. Shut down everything else until the war was over. The butler was to take charge of all the new properties immediately. The next morning, the nobles in the city, with their families and belongings, kept leaving in carriages and on horses. Many sat inside carriages or rode horses, frequently looking back at the city. Their eyes were full of reluctance. The noble mansions, familiar streets, and the prosperity of the past seemed to pull at their hearts. Finally, they gritted their teeth, made up their minds, and drove their carriages toward Longya Pass. Their figures gradually disappeared into the rising dust. Inside the castle, Karen, who was having breakfast, received a message from Vane through the communication crystal. Vane said they had successfully joined forces with the remnants of the 10th Legion. But after the meeting, they discovered that a superhuman orc army had been pretending to be inactive, only sending a few battalions to fish for information. Now that support had arrived, the orcs' true purpose was revealed. An entire superhuman army quickly appeared, closely following behind them, relentlessly pursuing. So far, there has been no sign of the Golden Beastman. However, under the Beastman's relentless pursuit, the 10th Legion and the Knights have suffered heavy losses, with their numbers greatly reduced and morale at an all-time low. Because the Beastman is chasing them too closely, they are forced to retreat into a large canyon on the Frost Zero Plain. Now, they are completely blocked in and trapped in a desperate situation. Additionally, Vane mentioned that their father has woken up, but his injuries are too severe for him to move for now. At the end of the message, Vane urgently pleads, "Big brother, if possible, send the remaining knights. No matter the cost, we must save our father." After reading the message, Kalen falls silent. Time seems to freeze as seconds pass. After a long moment, Kalen takes a deep breath, picks up the communication crystal, and forwards the entire message to Martin exactly as it was received. He also sends the location of the canyon, hoping Martin can come up with a plan to rescue their father from danger. Martin has just finished washing up when he receives a message. He quickly takes out the communication crystal, leans in to look, and suddenly his face changes drastically. His brows furrow as he quickly calculates the situation in his mind. After a long pause, he sighs helplessly and makes a bold decision. If it's going to be exposed, so be it. He then picks up the communication crystal, rapidly types a message, and sends it along with the canyon's location. Meanwhile, Betten and Druna receive their orders and immediately spring into action. The two quickly step out of the room, their knightly energy surging around them. In the blink of an eye, they vanish like ghosts. Soon after, they arrive at Martin's room. Martin raises his hand to signal them to wait, then turns and leaves. Moments later, Martin hurriedly returns, holding the last 2 sets of A-grade knight armor from the White family's collection in his space ring. The armor bears many shallow scars, clearly having endured the test of time. Martin hands the armor to the two. Without hesitation, Betten and Druna quickly put on the armor. In an instant, powerful energy bursts from their bodies. Their once ordinary figures are now made tall and mighty by the armor. They exchange a quick look, then bow to Martin. With a burst of speed, they transform into two streaks of shadow and rush toward the canyon at full speed. Meanwhile, inside the distant royal palace, in Prince Sokka's residence, court musicians were fully immersed in playing beautiful music. Prince Sokka leaned back in a soft chair, happily enjoying everything. Suddenly, a dark shadow appeared quietly in the corner of the palace, like a ghost. Prince Sokka sensed something was wrong. He immediately raised his hand to signal everyone to step back. After the musicians and servants left in a line and the door was closed, Prince Sokka asked anxiously, "Did you get that thing?" The shadow in the darkness slowly moved, revealing a strong, muscular orc. The orc radiated wild energy. Wearing a cloak made of magical materials, he stepped into the light. He didn't bow, and his attitude was very stiff. "Your magic device really works." The communication crystal in that area instantly stopped working. It's a pity that the S-level device was wasted like this. He then took out an ancient magical item called the SS-level dragon ring from his space ring and handed it to Prince Sokka. "The Grand Elder told me to give this to you and said to wish you a happy cooperation." After speaking, the orc slowly moved back to the corner of the palace, his figure instantly blending into the shadows and disappearing without a trace. Prince Sokka took the dragon ring, gently rubbing it in his hand. After a long while, he reluctantly stored the ring in his space ring. At this moment, a fierce battle was raging in the Frost Zero Plain Grand Canyon. The orc had driven the remnants of the 10th Legion and the Knights into the canyon. Because the path below the canyon was narrowing and unsuitable for large-scale fighting, the attack slowed down. The remnants relaxed a little, relying on the terrain and the orcs to fight back and forth. Just then, behind the orc army, the orc commander looked at the stalled attack with fierce eyes. His patience was gone. He didn't want to wait another second. With a flash, he appeared in front of the knights. He charged alone, like a black lightning bolt, straight toward the remnants of the 10th Legion. In an instant, the already shaky defenses of the 10th Legion were completely broken. Seeing this, the two remaining Legion Knight commanders and the two Knight commanders from the White family looked at each other without hesitation and charged forward on horseback. However, when the two sides met, people were instantly cut down and fell from their horses. The knights behind them saw this, and their fear quickly spread like a wave in their hearts. But the orc leader showed no sign of stopping. He suddenly moved into the crowd. Suddenly, screams filled the air, severed limbs flew everywhere, and bodies sank into pools of blood. As more of their team fell, some knights couldn't bear the fear and turned to run away. Vayne and Derry shouted loudly, trying to keep order, but in this chaos, no one seemed to listen. The Count, cared for carefully by the healer, finally managed to speak weakly. Looking at the chaos outside the tent, the Count's eyes were serious. He ordered Captain Wally, "Go and call Vayne and Derry." When the two hurried to the Count's bedside, the Count, barely able to stand, looked at Wally and said in a deep voice, "Lead the knights to break through. Even if you all die, you must get them out." Wally asked hesitantly, "What will you do?" The Count showed a bitter, weak smile and shook his head slowly. His voice was low. "The orcs won't let me go." Wally hesitated after hearing this, a flicker of struggle in his eyes. After a moment, he silently nodded and left the tent. He took a deep breath, calmed himself, then loudly ordered his men to gather the knights quickly. Vayne and Derry, hearing the Count's order to escape, looked determined. They almost spoke together. "We won't leave. If we die, we die together here." The Count was shocked and started coughing violently, his face turning red. The healer nearby looked worried and quickly took out medicine, carefully feeding it to the Count. After a while, the Count gradually recovered. When his breathing steadied, he looked at Vayne and Derry and said earnestly, "You must go. Our family is in danger, and we need you to protect us. You have a heavy duty. Don't all fall here. Listen to me. Live on with hope." On the Frost Zero Plain, two figures raced like lightning. Betten looked anxious, running and shouting to Druna, "We must get to Count White quickly to protect him. If anything happens to the Count, young Master Martin won't forgive us." Druna nodded seriously, his eyes full of concern. The two of them quickened their steps, kicking up dust behind them. At this moment, the canyon echoed with shouts and fighting sounds. The battle had become very intense. A strong smell of blood filled every part of the canyon air, making people feel sick. The Golden Orc was like a war machine, charging through the armies of the 10th Legion and the White Knights. Wherever he went, chaos and panic followed. The knights were in disarray, running in all directions, and the scene was very messy. But behind the canyon was a dead end, with no way to escape. Led by the Golden Orc, the Orc army advanced steadily, slowly squeezing the remaining knights' space to run. Inside the canyon, the space was shrinking as the Orcs pushed forward. The Count knew they couldn't wait any longer. He quickly ordered Wally to lead the knights to attack the Orcs. At this moment, the Count looked pale and weak, lying on the bed with his eyes closed, lost in thought. As Wally led the knights rushing out like an arrow, the remaining soldiers of the 10th Legion shouted and followed without hesitation, trying to break out. The two groups clashed in the narrow canyon, with loud fighting sounds. Blood soon stained the ground. But the Golden Orc still stood in front of everyone, a terrifying obstacle. He radiated a bloody aura. Wherever he went, there was ruthless slaughter. His heavy armor was soaked with blood. The breakout was very difficult. As the charge lost momentum, Wally and the others were surrounded instead of escaping. The Count saw this and felt anxious. Without thinking, he wanted to use a level B potion called Life Burn to gain more power and turn the battle around. But the healer quickly stopped him, firmly refusing. The healer explained urgently that given the Count's current health, taking the potion now would drain his energy before he could break free, leaving him exhausted and helpless. Once in that situation, the situation would only become more dangerous. While everyone was fighting hard, suddenly, two figures tore through the sky and rushed forward at lightning speed. The raging golden beast man also suddenly stopped swinging his bloodstained sword, slowly lifted his head, and his blood-red eyes fixed tightly on these two figures. The visitors were Betten and Druna. Seeing the fierce chaos in the canyon, they didn't hesitate. They quickly took out healing potions and drank them, then shot forward like arrows toward the golden beast man. In an instant, where the three fought, it seemed to form a terrifying whirlpool of death. Whether it was the fierce beast man or the brave knight, anyone caught in it would be crushed by the terrible power. The golden beast man, fully unleashed, looked like an ancient beast, full of power. But Betten and Druna were not afraid and fought him fiercely. Soon, around the three of them, there were no other living things, leaving a large, terrifying empty space. Seeing this, the beastmen and knights all stopped fighting at the same time, their eyes fixed on the intense battle in the center. They didn't dare to make a sound. As time went on, with Betten and Druna working together to attack, even the strong golden beast man began to show signs of weakness and cracks appeared on his body. Suddenly, the golden beast man made a mistake. Betten seized the chance and struck his thigh with a sword. The beast man cried out in pain, staggered, and his steps became unsteady. But before he could catch his breath, Druna's sword flashed like a cold light, swiftly slashing toward his neck. The golden beast man had no time to dodge and could only watch as the sharp knight's sword cut toward him. In the next second, blood splattered everywhere. His neck and body separated, and his huge body fell heavily to the ground. After defeating the golden beast man, Betten and Druna didn't stop. They turned and charged at the remaining beastmen around them. Where they went, the beastmen fell one after another, screaming loudly. After a fierce slaughter, except for a few beastmen who managed to escape, all the others lay dead in the canyon. Once the battle was over, Betten and Druna didn't linger. They suddenly pushed off the ground with force, disappeared from the canyon in the blink of an eye, and vanished from everyone's sight, leaving behind a mess in the canyon and a group of people still trembling with fear. The Count watched the two golden knights walk away, filled with suspicion. Since they appeared, they had silently dealt with the golden beastmen and the slaughter of the beastman army, then hurriedly left without a word. This was very confusing. Have the noble reinforcements arrived? The Count wondered silently. But he quickly dismissed the thought. No, if they were real noble reinforcements, why act like this? They didn't even show their faces or explain anything. He thought hard, but couldn't figure out where these two golden knights had come from or why they suddenly appeared to help. Fortunately, with the defeat of the beastman super army, This dangerous crisis was finally over. The Count knew it was not safe to stay here long. He didn't order the cleanup of the battlefield, but immediately told the Wali and Vane brothers to lead the surviving knights and leave the canyon quickly, heading toward the city of the Sword Oath. Under the Count's urging, everyone hurried along, horses' hooves kicking up clouds of dust. On the way, Vane took a moment to use a communication crystal to send a message to Kalen. He told Kalen everything about the Beastman army in the canyon, the fierce battle, and how the mysterious Golden Knights appeared to turn the tide. He also specifically asked Kalen not to send more knights for support, because at their current speed, they would reach the city of the Sword Oath in about half a day. Meanwhile, in the city of the Sword Oath, Kalen received the message and immediately went to Martin's room. At the same time, Martin had just received a brief message from Benton, mission accomplished. Before Kalen could speak, Martin raised his head with a relaxed look and was the first to share the good news. Kalen was surprised at first, but then he remembered that the two powerful Golden Knights were Martin's subordinates. This eased his surprise. However, Kalen knew some things didn't need to be questioned deeply. All he needed to know was that the person in front of him was Martin White. As evening fell, the sunset painted the sky with a beautiful golden edge. After a long and difficult journey, the Count and his group finally saw the city of the Sword Oath in the distance, feeling as if they had crossed into a different world. On the city wall, a sharp-eyed knight was the first to spot them and excitedly shouted out. The knight captain raised his voice even more and yelled, "The Count has returned." His voice echoed through the air, breaking the quiet of the evening. Immediately, he sent someone to inform Lord Karen and Lord Martin. When Karen and Martin hurriedly arrived at the wall, the Count and a group of tired but eager knights had already reached the city gate. The seasoned knights' emotions overflowed at this moment. Some knights had red eyes and tears streaming down their faces. Others cheered loudly with excitement, and many were too overwhelmed to speak. Seeing this, Karen quickly ordered the city gate to be opened to welcome the Count back. Then, he calmly arranged for the 10th Legion and his own knight group to be properly settled in the city's military camp. At the same time, he also ordered plenty of food to comfort everyone's hunger. The healer hurried over with medicine, ready to treat the injured. The Count, surrounded by Karen and others, entered the castle. Perhaps because he finally returned to his warm home and felt completely relaxed, the Count gradually fell into a deep sleep without realizing it. Karen and the others saw this and silently decided not to disturb him, planning to rest for the night and deal with any issues tomorrow. Thanks to the healer's careful care overnight and the blessing of a top-tier life source from the family, the Count was now able to walk again. Knowing that the Orc Kingdom might attack at any time, he didn't delay and immediately ordered his servants to summon Karen and his children to his room. When everyone was gathered, the Count looked over each person with a gentle, slightly hoarse voice and said, "During the time I was away, a lot must have happened at home. Karen, please tell us everything." Karen stepped forward and carefully recounted everything that had happened during this period. He told how the lady and family were safely sent to Belen's territory, how the nobles fled in panic, how their assets were taken over, how Marquis Roderick's knights couldn't arrive in time, and how the nobles at Longfong Pass delayed at a critical moment. Every detail was clearly shared with everyone. However, when the story was about to turn to Martin, Karen suddenly stopped. He instinctively looked at Martin, his eyes full of hesitation. His lips parted as if to speak, but seemed to be blocked by something, unsure whether he should say anything. The Count keenly sensed something unusual. He frowned slightly and said softly, "Everyone here is family. If you have something to say, just say it. No need to worry." Even so, Karen did not speak immediately. Instead, he looked at Martin again, as if waiting for his approval before continuing. Martin saw this and felt a bit amused. He nodded slightly to Karen, giving his permission. After receiving Martin's approval, Karen took a deep breath and then shared the news about Martin having 2 golden knights. Hearing this, the Count's surprised expression quickly turned serious. His mind involuntarily recalled what had happened in the Great Canyon. He stared closely at Martin, full of suspicion and curiosity. He asked uncertainly, "Are those 2 golden knights from the Great Canyon your people?" Martin looked calm and showed no hesitation. He slowly nodded. Vane, who was nearby, couldn't hold back his curiosity anymore. He blurted out, "Martin, how did you do it?" Derry also nodded eagerly, his eyes shining with a desire to know. Martin bit his lip and stayed silent. The Count saw Martin's difficulty and understood there must be a hidden story. He stopped asking how Martin did it and instead looked at him with concern. He said seriously, "I don't care how those 2 golden knights came to be. What I care about is whether they will fully obey your commands." Martin's eyes were firm. Without hesitation, he said, "Don't worry, father. If I give the order for them to sacrifice themselves, they will do so without hesitation. They are my loyal soldiers, completely faithful." Hearing this, the Count's tense nerves relaxed instantly. He let out a long breath. After all, if 2 untrustworthy golden knights joined the family, their strong power could easily overthrow the entire family. The consequences would be terrible. Thinking for a moment, the Count spoke again. "Such loyal knights. I want to meet them and thank them in person." Martin shook his head without hesitation, refusing. "Father, it's better not to see them. I don't want them to appear too often in public." Hearing Martin's words, the Count felt a bit disappointed but understood the reasons behind it. He no longer pressed the matter. Turning to Karen, he spoke seriously. "Karen, time is short. You must quickly count our casualties and the number of soldiers still able to fight. Right now, the Orc Kingdom is still watching us closely. At least 2 of their elite armies and several ordinary Orc armies are stationed on the Frost Zero Plain. We don't know if they will send more elite troops to attack us later. So, we must gather all the fighters we have and hold our ground until Marquis Roderick's reinforcements arrive. Although the reinforcements are few, as long as we hold on until the royal army comes, I believe this crisis can be solved." Karen looked serious and nodded carefully, remembering the Count's orders. After giving these instructions, the Count waved his hand, signaling that Karen and the others could leave. They filed out one after another, with Martin's figure disappearing among them. But the Count's eyes stayed fixed on Martin until his back disappeared outside the door. His mind drifted away, lost in deep thought. Could he not be my son? This thought struck him like lightning, making his heart tremble suddenly. Martin's recent strange behavior, his mysterious ways of doing things, and the 2 golden knights who suddenly appeared. Each incident seemed strange and hard to explain, making him suspicious. But after the shock and doubt, the Count shook his head heavily, trying to dismiss these distracting thoughts. He looked toward where Martin had gone, his eyes softening and becoming firm. He knew very well that with Martin's current power, controlling the entire White family would be easy. But Martin was still loyal and behaved properly, never betraying his family. At this moment, the Count deeply felt that, no matter what unknown past Martin had, he was still Martin White, with the White family's fiery blood flowing in his veins. In this dangerous time, when the family's fate hung by a thread, this blood connection was the strongest bond, more precious than anything else in the world, and just this alone was enough for the Count to trust him completely. News spread that Count returned to the city of the Oath of the Lost Sword. The whole city seemed to feel lighter, and the residents' mood improved. Meanwhile, in the Orc Kingdom, General Coulson was furious. He scolded 2 army commanders loudly. "Do you understand what it means to have a fully organized, extraordinary army for the kingdom? It took a lot of gold and effort to build that army. I ordered you to act together, so why didn't you?" One of the commanders replied, "Wild Tooth didn't let us. He said the 10th Army was already damaged, and their Count was badly hurt and close to death. So he took his troops alone to chase them. We didn't expect the human knights to have 2 golden knights either," he added with an innocent look at General Coulson. Coulson took a deep breath, waved his hand, and signaled the commanders to leave. After they left, Coulson opened a communication crystal and reported the situation to the Orc King. Sure enough, the king's voice came through, stern and harsh. "Coulson, as the army commander, it's one thing if your strength isn't enough, but are you also lacking brains?" Then the king added, "Listen, the treaty with the Ginger Dwarf Kingdom will expire in half a year. No matter what, we must seize enough gold and supplies." After ending the call, Coulson slumped into his chair, frowning in thought. "No, the human kingdom's reinforcements will arrive in a few days. We must act quickly." He slowly stood up, walked to the large military map, and fixed his eyes on the fall autumn mountains near the city of the Oath of the Lost Sword. After a moment of thought, he decisively ordered his men to recall the 2 army commanders. When they hurried over, Coulson looked angrily at one of them and said in a deep voice, "Fury, follow me around the fall-autumn mountains. We have no other choice now. We must take a risky move." Then he turned to the other commander and ordered, "Lead the extraordinary army and a few regular armies to feint attack the city of the Oath of the Lost Sword. Set up around the city, pretend to attack, and mobilize occasionally. If all goes well, we can return in half a month." After speaking, he led the furious army toward the fall-autumn mountains. Although all were extraordinary orcs, the mountains were full of danger, including powerful magical beasts and tricky monster groups. After crossing the fall-autumn mountains, the orc army's numbers dropped by nearly 500 or 600 soldiers. However, they found a safer mountain path. Standing on the mountain, Coulson looked down at fall-autumn town. He did not order an attack to avoid revealing their plans, which could prevent maximum profit and stop conflicts with the Golden Knights of the Count's territory. Then, he led his team around to the back of fall-autumn town, heading toward a Viscount's territory. During a routine patrol, the Viscount's Knight squad discovered the unexpected guests, orc soldiers. The Knights were shocked. They never thought orcs would appear in the northern region. They didn't hesitate and immediately turned their horses to rush toward the Viscount's castle, planning to inform everyone inside about the emergency. But the orcs quickly spotted the patrol knights. A few Silver Squad leaders shouted loudly and charged at the knights like arrows shot from a bow. The knights desperately whipped their horses, urging them forward, trying to reach the castle before the orcs caught up. To their horror, the orcs ran faster than expected and quickly caught up. After a fierce fight, the Knight squad was completely defeated. Then, the orc army launched a reckless attack on the Viscount's territory. Wherever they went, they slaughtered villages, set fires, and looted without mercy. They continued their rampage all the way to the foot of the Viscount's city. At this time, the Viscount had taken the only knight group away to gather with the allied army. The city now only had a few small knight squads and some ordinary soldiers. Faced with the fierce attack, the city's defenses quickly fell. Only a few knights retreated to the Viscount's castle. Inside the castle, the Viscountess was anxious. She hurriedly used a communication crystal to send a message to the Viscount. She informed him that the castle was about to be breached by the orcs. Meanwhile, she instructed the remaining knights and the Viscount's family members to escape through a secret tunnel. Far at the allied camp, the Viscount learned that his castle had fallen to the orcs. He was filled with anger and frustration, but felt helpless. He forcefully suppressed the urge to rush back immediately to assist, knowing that only by calling on greater strength could he hope to turn the situation around. So, the Viscount hurriedly headed to Lord Roderick's camp. When he heard the Viscount's urgent report, the Lord's face suddenly changed. He instinctively thought that the city of the Sword's Oath had been attacked. He quickly took out a communication crystal to ask Count White about the situation. After confirming that Count White was safe, the Lord let out a long breath. However, news of the orcs attacking the Viscount's territory undoubtedly sounded the alarm for the Allied forces' preparations. Realizing the situation was urgent, the Lord immediately decided to speed up the gathering of the Allied army. He issued orders to all forces. If they cannot arrive on time by tomorrow morning, we will not wait any longer. The army will set out immediately. For a while, the camp was busy. Soldiers hurried to prepare their gear. Nobles discussed marching plans urgently, and the entire camp was filled with the tense atmosphere of an upcoming battle. Meanwhile, after Coulson's successful raid, he tasted victory and immediately ordered the orcs to transport the stolen gold and supplies through the fall-autumn mountains back to Frost Zero Pass. He planned to continue looting while other nobles were still unaware. When the powerful nobles of the northern border outside the Dragon Tooth Pass learned that orcs had bypassed the city of the Sword's Oath and were plundering behind the lines, panic spread among them. They urgently asked Lord Roderick for orders, begging him to send troops immediately. There was no time to wait. Under intense pressure from the nobles, the Lord reluctantly ordered the army to set out that afternoon, heading straight for the orc forces ravaging within the territory. However, due to the hurried nature of the action, he only managed to assemble 12 knightly regiments. Worse still, these regiments varied greatly in personnel and equipment, and their command structure was quite chaotic. Originally, The Lord planned to wait until the entire allied force was assembled before making a unified plan. But now, with the orcs ravaging and the situation critical, he could only hastily issue personnel orders and rush into battle. Just as the allied army set out, another piece of bad news arrived. One baron's territory had been looted completely, with all valuables taken and civilians slaughtered. The Lord's face grew serious. Filled with anger and anxiety, he suppressed his emotions and ordered the army to march faster, aiming to catch up and eliminate the orcs as soon as possible. During the journey, the Marquis contacted Count White through a communication crystal, hoping he could send the night order from his direction to attack from two sides. However, after receiving Karen's detailed report, Count White had no choice but to reply that only 6 night squads were available to fight now, including the Royal 10th Legion. Moreover, outside the city of the Oath of the Lost Sword, the orc army's traces had been found. The defensive line was under great pressure, and he could barely hold his position, let alone send support. In the Count's room, White called Martin over and, with a serious look, shared shocking news. The orcs had crossed the city of the Oath of the Lost Sword. Martin was stunned and full of questions, unable to understand how the orcs managed to bypass the city. But he knew the Count had called him for a reason, so there must be more to it. Sure enough, after a brief pause, the Count said worriedly, "I am worried about the ladies in Bellin. Now, the orcs are burning, killing, and looting outside the Count's territory. No one can say if they might attack us. He asked you to arrange for a golden knight to go to Bellin's estate, so their safety can be assured." Without hesitation, Martin nodded immediately. His family was there, and with orcs ravaging outside, he couldn't rest easy without sending a golden knight. The Count watched Martin's quick response with a look of relief, and the lingering unease in his heart finally disappeared. "Help! Save me!" A desperate cry pierced the sky. As the last civilian was cut down by an orc's blade, another noble territory fell. Coulson looked at the pile of spoils with a proud smile, then quickly ordered the orc squad to take the space rings and rush toward the Autumn Mountain Range. News spread rapidly. Reports of the plundered territories reached the ears of the Marquis and other nobles. The scale of the orc army was gradually revealed. It was almost a full-strength orc extraordinary legion. Hearing this, many nobles felt uneasy, but they couldn't just stand by and watch their lands be attacked. The Marquis immediately gathered the nobles into the large tent. Standing in front of the military map, he looked serious and said, "Now, another Viscount's territory has been attacked. I have an idea. Currently, the orcs are in Sunyan territory. We found a place called Frost Ridge around it. Orcs must pass through this area no matter which route they take. We will set up defenses here. The golden orcs have very strong senses, so sneaking in is impossible." At this moment, a Viscount asked nervously, "What about the other 2 barren territories? Are we just ignoring them?" The Marquis replied in a deep voice, "Any action requires sacrifice. Defending Frost Ridge is the best plan right now. There's no need to discuss other options." "That's settled." The nobles nodded in agreement. Suddenly, 2 barons asked, "Lord Marquis, can we take our families away first?" The Marquis thought for a moment and finally nodded. "Yes, but do it quickly." The 2 barons hurried out of the tent, quickly gathered their knights, and headed toward their family homes. However, things took a sudden turn. In the next 2 days, both baron territories were attacked one after another. Their wealth was looted, and the barons' wives and children were not spared. When the 2 barons hurried back to their lands, they saw a large group of civilians fleeing in panic. Seeing their barons, the civilians quickly told them the bad news. Their territories had been attacked. Before the barons could feel too sad, they ran straight into orcs hunting civilians. Without hesitation, the barons drew their knights' swords and led their knights to charge at the orcs. They fought bravely and soon killed all the orcs in front of them. Unfortunately, this drew the attention of other orcs. Outnumbered, the 2 barons ultimately died in battle. During these 2 days, the Marquis finally arrived at Frost Ridge and quickly organized people to build defenses in an orderly way. Meanwhile, deep in the Loachio Mountains, a team of mercenaries was hunting magical beasts. Despite the dark clouds of war hanging over them, these mercenaries did not seem too worried. In their view, if they couldn't fight, they would run. Wherever they went, they could find a way to survive. Suddenly, the mercenaries sharply sensed a faint but unusual movement. They believed that the approaching monsters were about to be hunted, so they quickly and quietly lay down on the grass, hiding among the bushes. However, what appeared before them were not the expected monsters, but a group of orcs. These orcs had wild smiles on their faces, moved quickly, and hurried past. Suddenly, a small orc squad leader stopped abruptly. As a powerful warrior at the peak of knighthood, he used his keen senses to detect a group of humans at the knight level hiding nearby in the grass. He was startled and immediately thought they had been ambushed. Without hesitation, he led his squad, filled with hostility, toward the hiding mercenaries. The mercenaries' nerves instantly tensed when they saw the orcs and became highly alert. Seeing the fierce charge of the orcs, they didn't hesitate and turned to run. The orcs chased after them relentlessly. Eventually, in a mountain hollow, the orcs managed to block the mercenaries' escape. Seeing no hope of escape, the mercenaries clenched their teeth, drew their weapons, and charged at the orcs. The orcs refused to back down, and the two sides clashed fiercely. Because the orcs had a clear numerical advantage, the battle quickly turned in their favor, and the mercenaries were scattered and forced to flee. The orcs, knowing that transporting money and supplies was urgent, did not pursue further. Instead, they hurried toward the Frost Zero Pass. The escaped mercenaries dared not delay and immediately reported the situation to the town mayor. The mayor realized the situation was very urgent. He quickly decided to buy a communication crystal at a high price. After some tense operation, he used the crystal to send the message to the Earl's steward, who then promptly relayed it to the Earl. Upon receiving the message, the Earl immediately summoned Martin, planning to send the Golden Knights to investigate the situation quickly and thoroughly. Hearing this, Martin immediately thought of the extraordinary orc army in the northern border and did not delay at all. He quickly used the communication crystal to inform Druna of the mercenaries' report and the details of the mission. Upon receiving the message, Druna swiftly left the city at full speed, heading toward the Luoyu mountain range. Although it was regrettable to report the delay in time, by the time he arrived at the Luoqiu Mountains, half a day had already passed since the mercenaries discovered the orcs. At this moment, the orcs had disappeared without a trace. Druna carefully analyzed the information provided earlier by the mercenaries and keenly sensed that the orcs were likely heading toward the Frost Zero Pass. Having made up his mind, he pushed off again and rushed full speed toward Frost Zero Pass. Half an hour later, as the sky darkened, Druna suddenly froze. He seemed to have found the orc's trail. In an instant, Druna acted without hesitation, drawing his knight's sword and charging forward. His attack was fierce and deadly, and in a short time, only 3 orcs remained alive on the battlefield. Druna strode forward, his cold gaze sweeping over the faces of the 3 orcs. He first grabbed one of the smaller orcs and asked sternly, "Tell me, how did you cross the city of the Oath of the Lost Sword?" The orc trembled with fear and stammered that Commander Coulson led them along the edges of the territories of the Golden Beasts. There, hardly anyone from humans would go. With the help of the furious Legion commander, they paid with hundreds of lives before finally leaving the Luoqiu Mountains. Next, the second orc spilled everything like a water jar, saying, "A group of stolen treasures has already been sent back to the Orc Kingdom, but this time, it's definitely the largest." He pointed to Druna's space ring. "All of these are stolen from the territories of a few viscounts and barons, stacked full." The third orc didn't say much, only nodding repeatedly. After killing the 3 orcs, Druna turned back toward the city of the Oath of the Lost Sword. When he arrived at the castle, he went straight to Martin's room and gently knocked on the door. Hearing Martin's consent from inside, he pushed the door open and entered. As soon as he stepped inside, Druna knelt on one knee and handed the space ring to Martin, respectfully saying, "Sir, the task is complete." Then he recounted the entire story, the cause, the process, everything without holding back. Martin listened, his expression gradually becoming serious, filled with shock. He had not expected the orcs to be so bold. If they had been a little less careful, the extraordinary army might have been destroyed in the Luoqiu Mountains. After all, in the Fall-Autumn Mountains, there are already 3 Sky Knight-level magical beasts and a frost giant dragon with the strength of a Sky Mage. This power is extremely strong. A small mistake could lead to disaster, and even the kingdom has no good way to deal with it. Martin listened to the report, then took the space ring handed to him by Druna. He also took another space ring from his storage and handed it to Druna, saying, "There are 1,000 gold coins and some potions inside. Keep it." When Druna received it, Martin waved his hand to signal him to leave. As soon as Druna left, Martin eagerly sat down and placed the several space rings he just received on the table, carefully examining each one. As he looked deeper, his eyes grew wider, and his face showed more and more surprise. Inside the rings, there were over 200,000 gold coins, along with various rare potions, armor of higher levels, and plenty of supplies. This was truly a very rich harvest. Excited, Martin immediately ordered his servant, "Go and call all my guards." Soon, 8 guards lined up neatly and quickly arrived at Martin's room. Martin's eyes shone like torches as he looked over them, carefully selecting 3. He pointed at them and said, "You 3, come with me." Then, Martin led these 3 guards out of the city, using a communication crystal to call Druna, who had just left. Druna, with 2 people at a time, quietly left the city. Because there was no horse, and the other 3 guards were only at the Black Iron Knight level. Plus Martin was an ordinary person. It took about 2 hours. Finally, they reached the previous valley. Everything there was still as it had been before, quiet and peaceful, with no change at all. Martin looked around and gave instructions to the 3 guards, telling each to stand at one of the 4 sides of the valley. Then, he bent down and took out 166,500 gold coins from the space ring, skillfully dividing them into 3 piles. Once everything was ready, Martin took a deep breath, his eyes full of anticipation, preparing to help the guards advance. With a thought, the 3 piles of gold seemed to be pulled by an invisible force and slowly disappeared. At the same time, a strange glow appeared on the guards' bodies. Their strength levels soared from bronze to silver, and finally, they successfully broke through to the gold level. As they were promoted, a strong and oppressive aura swept over them. Martin truly felt this heavy pressure, as if a huge stone was pressing on his chest. Fortunately, Druna was beside him. Druna quickly stepped forward, his knightly power surging around him, blocking this powerful force from Martin. Then, Martin took out a communication crystal from his pocket and sent a message to the butler, telling him he would return in a few days. After doing this, Martin and Druna went to a large, leafy tree. Martin looked up at Druna and said, "Go gather some dry wood. We've been busy for a long time. It's late at night, and we should have some supper." He then took out some fresh monster meat and a bottle of fruit wine from his space ring, placing them on the grass nearby. Soon, Druna returned with a bundle of dry wood and quickly started a fire to cook the meat. The flames flickered, and the smell of grilled meat filled the air. Martin sat nearby, unable to hold back, and started eating happily. Druna occasionally took a few bites, but most of the food went into Martin's stomach. They kept busy all night. As Martin grew sleepy, he found a comfortable spot under the tree and slowly fell asleep, while Druna quietly guarded him. In the following days, the progress of their advancement went smoothly. During this time, the Count asked about Martin's return and whether he needed help. Martin replied that he would probably be back in a couple of days and hadn't encountered any serious trouble. Time passed quickly, and before they knew it, the 4th day arrived. This time, everyone advanced directly from Iron Knight to Gold Knight. Because of different physical qualities, some people only took 3 days to adapt to the changes and stabilize their aura. Others struggled to control their power, with their aura flickering unpredictably, as if they might lose control at any moment, but they kept suppressing it again and again. Quietly, on the 7th day, the last knight finally succeeded in becoming a Gold Knight. Many things happened during these 7 days. Karen also contacted Martin, urging him to return soon and telling him that the Marquis and others were under very heavy attack at Frost Ridge. Since Frost Ridge had no strategic terrain to defend, they could only defend passively. At first, on the 1st day, the orc attacks weren't very fierce, but for some reason, on the 2nd day, the orcs suddenly launched a furious assault, attacking with great ferocity. This battle caused heavy casualties, almost 3 Black Iron Knights for every 1 orc. Such losses made the Marquis and other nobles find it hard to accept. After hearing this, Martin guessed that perhaps the orcs, upon learning their wealth had been stolen, were eager to recover their losses. They also feared the two golden knights who had appeared earlier and dared not attack the Marquis' territory. Instead, they turned to attack the Frost Ridge area. However, Martin never expected that Coulson had already considered the problem of lacking high-level combat power. He had called in 2 golden shamans from the Orc King. These shamans pretended to attack the Frost Ridge area to confuse the human alliance. In fact, they split half of the Orc army to secretly plan an attack on the city of the Sword Oath. When the golden shamans arrived with the Orc army on the Frost Zero plain, they launched a full attack together. Their plan was to first take the city of the Sword Oath, gather their forces, and then march straight to the Dragon Tooth Pass. Meanwhile, the royal army of the kingdom was about to enter the northern border. At noon, Martin and Druna returned to the city of the Sword Oath. Because they lacked magical items to hide their appearances, Martin first ordered everyone to stay in the valley to get familiar with their powers. After several days of careful rest and taking potions on time, the Count's health greatly improved. He was now able to move around freely. Some lightly injured knights, under the careful care of the alchemists, recovered well and rejoined the knight group. The Count walked over to the wounded knights' camp to check on them one by one. Seeing the Count arrive, the knights struggled to stand and greet him, but he gently stopped them. He then asked the alchemists, "Do we have enough healing potions right now?" The lead alchemist respectfully replied, "My Lord Count, we are barely able to maintain the supply. Most of the knights here need at least 2 weeks of rest before they can walk again. And those knights whose limbs were cut off, even if healed, might not be able to serve in the knight group anymore." The Count said seriously, "Do your best to treat them. No need to worry." With that, the Count left the room amid the respectful and grateful looks of the knights. Later, he checked the city defenses. After confirming everything was in order, he returned to his study to handle the busy affairs. Back inside the city, Martin went straight to the Emerald Guild. The guild's entrance was quiet and empty, very different from the lively scene of the past, showing that business was very slow. He entered the Chamber of Commerce and instructed his assistant to invite the person in charge, claiming he had a big deal to discuss. When the assistant saw it was Martin, he immediately went to report. Soon after, a young girl came out, very different from the previous person in charge. The girl was about 15 or 16 years old, with a gentle face and a soft smile at the corner of her mouth. She walked gracefully to Martin and, in an instant, a light, elegant fragrance filled the air around him. Martin instinctively sniffed the air. Noticing his reaction, the girl blushed slightly but quickly regained her composure and softly said, "Young Master Martin, I heard you have a big deal to discuss. May I ask what it is about?" Then Martin listed the quantities of grain, daily necessities, beautiful clothes, and other supplies. After hearing this, the girl felt a bit suspicious. These supplies seemed similar to those recently taken by the Beastmen. She then asked, "Young Master Martin, do you have armor or potions? Our Chamber of Commerce is willing to pay extra to buy them." Honestly, in a few days, the Emerald Chamber of Commerce and other merchants plan to leave the city of the Sword Oath temporarily, as the ongoing war has greatly affected trade and transportation. Martin nodded, indicating he was willing to sell some armor and potions if the price was right. He then asked the girl about the prices of these items. She called over the previous person in charge to help appraise the goods. After careful calculation, they estimated the total value of the supplies to be about 21,008 gold coins and 78 silver coins. The girl quickly rounded up and offered a total of 21,010 gold coins. Hearing this, Martin thought for a moment and asked, "Does your shop have any A-grade knight armor?" The girl frowned slightly, thought for a moment, and replied, "Currently, we only have one piece of A-grade knight armor in the warehouse. It is a treasure of our Emerald Chamber of Commerce branch and worth a lot. If you are truly interested, you can buy it for 50,000 gold coins." Martin quietly considered this. Although the price was high, A-grade knight armor was very hard to find. Without enough gold, he couldn't wear it anyway. After some thought, he decided to sell a small part of his own armor and potions. After careful evaluation, the person in charge and the girl agreed on a fair price. Adding the gold earned from previous trades, Martin's wealth not only remained the same, but increased by over 10,000 coins. Since Martin wanted to buy such expensive armor, he didn't miss the chance to bargain. He smiled and asked the young girl, "Can you give me a discount for such a big deal?" The girl looked thoughtful for a moment, then happily replied, "Considering our long-term cooperation with young Master Martin, I can offer you a 10% discount." Martin wanted to negotiate further to get a lower price, but the girl said 10% was the lowest they could go. Anything less, and they couldn't sell it. Seeing this, Martin didn't insist further. Both sides smoothly completed the payment and item transfer. After the transaction, the girl handed over the remaining tasks to the manager and went inside. Curious, Martin asked the manager, "Who was that girl just now?" The manager hesitated briefly, looked at Martin, and then said, "She is the third daughter of our Jade Chamber of Commerce president, named Adele Hyde." The president decided to temporarily leave the city of the Oath of the Lost Sword, so he sent the third young lady here to organize the accounts and pack the piled goods. Once she's done, they will return in a couple of days. The manager explained everything about the girl in detail. Listening, Martin looked thoughtful. Then, with the manager accompanying him, he left the chamber. Outside, he visited several other chambers. After a long journey, he finally gathered 2 more sets of A-grade knight armor and 3 sets of B-grade magic tools called Thousand Faces. He spent all his gold on these items, exchanging potions and armor for coins. In the end, he only had a few miserable silver coins left in his pocket. After finishing everything, Martin returned to the castle, went straight to the stables, chose a strong, large-horned horse, and rode out of the city. Under Drina's protection, he hurried toward the valley where the 3 people were. When he arrived, Martin handed the knight armor and masks to the 3 who were adapting to their strength. They quickly put on the gear. In an instant, the 3, dressed in A-grade knight armor, felt the power of knights flowing through them. They were very grateful and kneeled before Martin, loudly saying, "Thank you, young master, for your kindness and help." Martin nodded slightly to signal them to stand. Then he asked the 3 to follow him back to the city of the Oath of the Lost Sword. Upon entering the city, Martin distributed a space ring and communication crystal to each person. However, they ran out of money and couldn't spare any more gold. He could only advise the 3 of them to find Drina for food, clothing, and daily needs, and to settle down at Drina's residence to rest well. Meanwhile, in the Orc Kingdom, 2 golden shaman had traveled a long distance and finally arrived at the Orc army stationed on the Frost Zero plain. The army commander sensed their arrival immediately and came out of the camp to greet them. After meeting, the commander used the communication crystal to inform Corson, who was fighting Marquis Rodrigo in the northern border, that the high-level combat forces had arrived. When Corson received the message, he quickly decided to split his army into 2 parts. He ordered the deputy commander to gradually weaken the attack and prepare to face the human allied forces. He also warned that they must not let the humans discover the size of their army quickly. If they did, they must do everything possible to stop the human forces, even if it meant sacrificing half of the Orc Extraordinary Army to hold back the humans at Frost Ridge and buy time to attack the Yejin Covenant City. After making arrangements, Corson took advantage of the fading daylight to personally lead the remaining Orc army swiftly toward Yejin Covenant City. Inside Yejin Covenant City, everything was as usual. Patrolling soldiers marched confidently and orderly through the streets. On the training grounds, knights shouted one after another, sweating profusely as they practiced their skills. Since the Orc Extraordinary Army camped on the Frost Zero plain, they had fallen into strange silence, showing no signs of movement, which was very unusual. Count Whitefelt felt uneasy and immediately sent several elite knight squads to investigate. Soon, the scouts returned with news. The orcs had been training intensely in their camp every day. Although they appeared ready to attack at any moment, no soldiers had left the camp. This news puzzled Count Whitefelt, but he was sure that the orcs were planning something. He immediately ordered to strengthen the city's defenses, expand the patrols, and stay alert. Martin was also eager to learn. He closely followed Karen, carefully studying every detail. Third brother Vane and fourth brother Deli often trained with Martin. On the training ground, the brothers practiced and improved together. In their free time, Martin would contact his mother through the communication crystal, reassuring her not to worry too much about him. He also chatted with Rena. Her family was inside Longya Pass and very safe. She had already gone to the Noble Academy in the capital on the first day of school. As they talked more, they shared interesting stories from their lives. Their laughter and joy spread through the communication crystal. Happy days always pass quickly. A few days later, when the reports from 2 night patrol teams suddenly stopped, the Count immediately ordered the knights to prepare their gear for the upcoming battle. On the Orc side, after Coulson sent a message through the communication crystal, the Orcs stationed on the Frost Zero plain quickly became busy. They quickly organized their weapons, armor, and supplies. Once everything was ready, they set out in a grand march toward the city of the Sword Oath. Within the Count's territory, after 3 days of marching, as they neared the city of the Sword Oath, Coulson no longer avoided patrols from villages and small towns inside the Count's land. Instead, he headed straight for the city, eager to arrive. As the Orcs advanced, information kept flowing into Count White's hands. After reading the reports, the Count looked serious. He knew the situation was urgent. He immediately used the communication crystal to warn Marquis Roderick, "My lord, don't fall into the Orcs' trap. The most urgent task is to quickly deal with the Orcs in the Frost Ridge area and then come to support us. The Orcs' target is the city of the Sword Oath. If they take it, they can break through and head straight to Lanya Pass. At that point, we're all doomed." After sending the message, Count White ignored the communication crystal. He quickly put on his heavy knight armor and calmly walked out of his room. Outside, Karen and others had been waiting for a long time, their faces full of worry and concern. The Count didn't say much. He just raised his hand to signal them to follow and strode toward the city wall. On the wall, looking out, the Orc army was approaching like a tide. Their dense figures, accompanied by roars and heavy footsteps, sent a chill down people's spines. Many experienced knights at this moment instinctively tightened their grip on their swords, veins bulging on their hands. Karen and the others looked nervous, their hearts pounding as if they might burst from their chests. The Count noticed their tension and told them to come forward, but only to let them briefly experience the tense atmosphere before battle. Then he softly said, "You should go back to the rear now." Karen and the others knew they were not yet true knights. Their strength and experience were far from enough. Staying on the dangerous front line would not help and might only be a burden. Reluctantly, they nodded silently and turned to go back to the rear, focusing on managing supplies, hoping to contribute to defending the city in another way. Only Martin returned alone to the castle. He took out 5 communication crystals and handed each to his 5 guards, serious as he instructed, spread out to the battle areas. "If the situation turns bad or something else happens, report to me immediately through these crystals." The guards accepted the orders and quickly left, their figures soon disappearing down the castle corridor. With the launch of magic cannons, the siege officially began. The city of the Oath of the Lost Sword was attacked by 2 groups of Orcs. With the help of magic cannons and the fighting at the fortresses on both sides, the situation was barely maintained. However, as the attack continued and the numbers of enemies vastly outnumbered them, this fragile balance was soon broken. The Count had to appear on the wall to help the knights defend. But while they held this side, problems arose on the other side of the city wall. At that moment, a golden knight appeared on the wall, and the situation instantly changed. The golden knight quickly cleared the Orcs rushing onto the wall, then charged down with his knight's sword. He fought fiercely, creating a blood path straight toward Coulson. Terrified, Coulson hurriedly ordered Fury to charge forward. The 2 golden warriors clashed immediately, while the Orcs kept their distance, creating a clear gap. On the other side of the battlefield, Count White had just slain a few Orcs rushing onto the wall when suddenly, 3 powerful golden auras rose from the Orc army's camp. Count White looked up and saw these 3 imposing figures, a deep feeling of helplessness flooding his heart. He knew very well that these 3 powerful warriors would come for him. However, as the guardian of the lost Sword Oath City, he had no intention of backing down. Just as the Count was about to fight desperately, 3 figures appeared on the city wall. The Count looked closely and saw that they were 3 golden knights. Their sudden arrival disrupted the Orcs' plans instantly. Originally, the Orcs aimed to use these 3 strong golden warriors to kill Count White and then break into the lost Sword Oath City. But they didn't expect there to be such powerful fighters inside. The situation suddenly turned around. The orcs didn't have time to think and could only fight bravely and quickly. The 3 golden knights didn't hesitate. They leapt down from the city wall, weapons shining with cold light, rushing toward the orcs. Their goal was clear: to keep the battle outside the city as much as possible, to prevent more damage inside. The orcs wouldn't give in easily. Both sides fought fiercely, exchanging blows. As the fight went on, the 6 figures moved farther and farther away, until they finally disappeared from everyone's sight. Count White looked in the direction they left, took a deep breath, and felt much less pressure on his shoulders. He instinctively thought this might be related to Martin, but quickly shook his head. Right now, he had to focus on defending the city. The city siege was still in full swing. Although the enemy's golden fighters had been successfully held back, the orcs' extraordinary army was still 3 times larger than the human knights. Count White supported from time to time, but his injuries were not healed, so his strength was greatly reduced. The situation on the wall was very dangerous. As the 2 fortresses were taken down, the orcs began to flood the wall like a tide, their fierce faces and bloodthirsty eyes shining with greed. The human knights fought bravely, wielding sharp blades and resisting with all their might. The shouting and clashing sounds were deafening. Wave after wave of orc attacks were stubbornly repelled, but the knights gradually showed signs of fatigue. This brutal city battle lasted from early morning until noon, and both sides were stuck in a stalemate. The orc army couldn't break through for a long time. Coulson's face grew darker, and anxiety and anger surged in his heart. He suddenly pulled out his communication crystal and shouted angrily at the other Vice Legion commander. "Listen, stop holding reserves. Send everyone to push forward. If we can't take this city, I'm doomed, and you won't survive either." After saying that, he waved his hand and threw the remaining orc troops into the battle without holding back. The Vice Legion commander on the other side didn't dare hesitate and also sent all his troops into the fight. Suddenly, on the battlefield, orcs roared. Waves of soldiers surged forward, launching a fierce final attack on the city walls. When a breach in the wall was successfully broken through, it seemed to trigger a domino effect, with more and more breaches appearing one after another. Count White saw that the situation was beyond saving and immediately ordered the remaining knights on the wall to retreat quickly. During this time, the Count hurriedly took out his communication crystal and asked Marquis Rodrigue, "Where are you now?" Rodrigue's voice came from the crystal, filled with worry and helplessness, still at Frost Ridge. "The orcs are fighting desperately and holding us back. We can't get to support you, but there's good news. The kingdom's reinforcements have crossed Dragontooth Pass and will arrive at Frost Ridge soon. Hang in there." Hearing this, the Count felt a surge of joy. He immediately ordered the knights to use a D-level magic device, a small horn, to spread the news that the kingdom's reinforcements were on their way. Inside the city walls, the knights, though exhausted, were suddenly energized by this uplifting news. Their fighting spirit seemed to boost, and their strikes grew faster. And so, time quietly moved into the evening. By now, the northern city wall had fallen completely. The knights could only resist with all their might while slowly retreating, and they arranged for all civilians in the northern district to move to the south for safety. Night battles were somewhat calmer than during the day. After a whole day of fierce fighting, the orcs were also exhausted. No matter how loudly the Vice Legion commander shouted or how tough his orders, the orcs' attack gradually slowed down. The fighting continued intermittently throughout the night, lasting until dawn. After sunrise, the northern district was fully occupied by the orcs, and the eastern wall had just fallen into enemy hands. This rapid conquest made Coulson very unhappy, but he had no way to stop it. Yesterday afternoon, the Golden Orcs returned. Both sides understood each other well and chose not to attack easily, just holding back each other. Coulson knew he could not afford to lose. However, even if they managed to take the city of the Oath of the Lost Sword, he knew he couldn't hold it for long. He was worried and thinking hard when suddenly, the communication crystal lit up with news from the Vice Legion commander of the Frost Ridge territory. "Support from the human kingdom has arrived. Our half-legion is almost exhausted. Commander, take care." Coulson was shocked. He quickly tried to contact back, but the signal was cut off. Communication was lost. This message was the last straw for Coulson. He froze in place, feeling as if his soul had been drained. After a long moment, he finally regained his senses. He looked much older, his face full of exhaustion and despair. Calming himself a little, Corson forced himself to be strong. He picked up the communication crystal and sent a message to the Legion commander in the northern district. Immediately withdraw from the city of the Oath of the Lost Sword. Abandon Frost Zero Pass and return to the Orc Kingdom. The Legion commander received the order, looked confused, and quickly replied, Commander, why? We put in so much effort and are about to take the city of the Oath of the Lost Sword. Why retreat now? Corson sighed deeply and told the Legion commander the bad news about Frost Ridge. There was a long silence on the other end. After a while, the Legion commander replied, Understood. But, Commander, how will you return? You don't need to worry about that. Your task now is to safely bring the Legion back to the Frost Zero plane, where you will support me, and then we will all retreat together, Corson said. After that, he stopped responding to the Legion commander's questions and ended the communication. Next, Corson summoned the furious Legion commander and gave him the same order. Withdraw from the city of the Oath of the Lost Sword. We will head to the Autumn Fall Mountains. Soon after, long, deep horns sounded across the battlefield. The orcs, who had been attacking, heard the horns and seemed to receive a unified command. They began to retreat slowly and in order. Meanwhile, Corson sighed. The communication crystal lit up again, and Marquis Roderick's message came through. It turned out that the reinforcements from the kingdom had successfully crossed Frost Ridge and advanced rapidly, defeating the orc forces stationed there. They were now rushing quickly toward the city of the Oath of the Lost Sword. The Count suddenly realized that it was no surprise that the orcs had just attacked like a rushing tide, but now they were retreating all at once. He felt an urge to chase after them, but when he looked at the tired and injured knights, that impulse was quickly suppressed by reason. These knights had fought a long and harsh battle to defend the city. Their bodies and minds were near their limits, and they could not bear the burden of chasing the retreating orcs. Meanwhile, Martin, through the message crystal from his subordinates, was secretly guessing why the orcs were retreating. He wondered if the kingdom's reinforcements had arrived. No matter the reason, Martin was determined not to let the orcs go easily. He quickly ordered the 4 golden knights to set out immediately and chase after the retreating orc army with all their strength. In the Fall Mountain range, groups of orcs hurried forward, their faces showing exhaustion and their bodies heavy from days of fighting. Yet, they dared not slow down. Coulson couldn't help but look back toward the city of the Sword's Oath, his eyes full of frustration and anger. That city, so close yet still unconquered, felt like an unhealed wound in his heart. After staring for a long time, he clenched his teeth and turned to catch up with the main force. At that moment, the leader of the furious legion suddenly stopped, and the orc troops behind him slowed down gradually. Seeing this, Coulson quickly asked, Are there magical beasts? However, the furious legion leader did not answer. Instead, he looked around nervously and then urgently urged Coulson, You must lead the remaining orc troops to leave now. Seeing the frantic look of the furious legion leader, Coulson was full of doubt, but he understood the situation was urgent and could not ask more. He immediately ordered the orcs to speed up. As soon as Coulson left, several figures appeared like ghosts in front of the furious legion. The furious leader looked closely and recognized the 4 golden knights. His heart sank, knowing he probably wouldn't escape today. But the furious was, after all, furious. Without hesitation, he quickly took out an A-grade potion called Beast Blood Boil from his space ring and drank it in one gulp. In an instant, his body erupted with a powerful aura. His muscles swelled, and his eyes burned with madness and battle intent. Without hesitation, he charged at the 4 golden knights, and a fierce battle immediately broke out between them. Coulson also sensed the intense fighting behind him and secretly complained. But he knew he couldn't stop now. After a moment of thought, he took out a level B single-use magic item called the Flag of Lightness, with a look of concern. When the magic item was activated, a strange power covered all the orcs. They immediately felt lighter, as if their burdens had been reduced by about 70%. The orcs cheered up, their steps becoming faster. They didn't even have time to avoid the eyes of the mercenaries in the mountains and ran wildly along the nearest path. In just half an hour, the orcs successfully left the Fall Autumn Mountains. Although the flag of lightness helped, some orc soldiers disappeared in the forest during the crossing. But Coulson didn't have time to feel sad. He quickly joined the main orc army and then kept running toward the orc kingdom without stopping. After calming the rage, the 4 golden knights were slightly injured during the fierce counterattack before their death. They quickly took healing potions, made some adjustments, and then continued chasing without delay. They ran out of the Fall Autumn Mountains and entered the Frost Zero Plain. There, they saw Coulson leading a group of orcs meeting with the main orc forces coming to support. Seeing this, the Golden Knights immediately reported the situation to Martin and asked for the next steps. Martin thought for a moment and decided to let Coulson and the others go, as he didn't want any casualties on Drina's side. Meanwhile, inside the city of the Oath of the Lost Sword, the Count was calmly commanding the knights to clean up the battlefield. He ordered that all living orcs be killed and their bodies burned outside the city. For the fallen knights, he asked for proper burial and respect. While the knights were busy clearing the battlefield, the Count used a communication crystal to inform Marquis Roderick of the situation. Roderick, upon hearing the news, didn't delay and immediately relayed it to the kingdom's commander, Herbert, who was heading to the city of the Oath of the Lost Sword. When Herbert heard this, he ordered the army to stop moving, change course, and withdraw inside Dragontooth Pass, where they set up camp. In the days that followed, the city of the Oath of the Lost Sword worked hard to repair the damage caused by the war. Today, Count Karen went to the Count's study with a serious expression and reported on the war situation. He clearly explained, "Father, after careful counting, our knights lost a total of 12,821 men in this brutal war. Uncle Wally also died in battle. Only about 800 surviving knights are still able to move normally, and around 300 are injured. Besides the loss of personnel, all kinds of supplies on the battlefield have been used up. Fortunately, civilian casualties in the city are not serious, and everyone has been properly cared for. However, the city buildings are badly damaged, especially in the north, which is almost leveled to the ground, with only broken walls remaining.